time you would like to introduce yourself in the chat or rename yourself, to rename yourself, please feel free to right-click on your own square or use the menu in the upper right of your own square, clicking on the three dots to rename yourself and add your affiliation, which I'm going to do now, and or click on your own square, right-click on your square to rename yourself, and feel free to also say hello in the chat. We'll get started in just a moment. Hello, welcome. It's just the top of the hour. I welcome people to the Reboot Democracy in the Age of AI lecture series. We will just let in a few more people from the waiting room, and we will go ahead and get started in just a moment. If you would like, while we are waiting, to rename yourselves by adding your affiliation so that Natalie knows who's here, we'd love to hear who's in the room. So please right-click on your own square to rename yourself. You're also welcome to use the chat to introduce yourself and for any discussion during the talk. Please note that if you have a question for Natalie, that goes in the Q&A button, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen. So to ask a question, and we hope you will, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen so we can hopefully moderate and order things. And without further ado, as people are coming in, let me go ahead and welcome folks and get that out of the way so we can maximize our time with our speaker today. So my name is Beth Novak. I'm the director of the GovLab and the Burns Center for Social Change at Northeastern University. And I'm delighted to welcome you to this Reboot Democracy in the Age of AI lecture series. We will put a link in the chat to the rest of the lecture series. We have some great events coming up and some past events which you might like to watch. If you're interested in the ways in which AI might help us or might harm us in our efforts to strengthen democracy and democratic institutions and improve how we govern. In this series, we welcome innovators, thinkers, researchers, and others exploring at this intersection between tech and democracy. Today, I'm very delighted to welcome Natalie Buda Smith, who is Director of Digital Strategy and Head of AI at the Library of Congress, which we look forward to hearing more about and hopefully seeing some great pictures of, because it is one of the prettiest buildings in Washington. We're going to talk about work underway at the Library of Congress using AI to improve access to legislative data, legislative operations, and lawmaking practices, and I suspect also hear a little bit about how the library itself is using AI in its own work. And we're really eager to hear about both the machine learning projects and the generative AI projects underway, and hear about some of the exciting experiments that are taking place. If you would like to learn more about the library and its work on AI, we'll put a link in the chat, as well as a link to the Library of Congress blog, which sometimes features posts by Natalie and her colleagues talking about AI. So we'll share some of those resources as we go along. And also Natalie's bio, so you can hear more about her exciting background. I won't spend time on what you can read because we want to hear from her, and I'll just make sure to acknowledge before we do that our series is hosted by the Governance Lab as well as the Burns Center for Social Change and our colleagues at the Institute for the Experiential AI at Northeastern University. Again, more links to come. But with that, Natalie, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you and just encourage people as you're talking, again, comments, discussion, etc. in the chat. We like to have a conversation in sort of 2-3 dimensions because we have a lot of experts in the room as well as you at the front of the room. So we want to encourage conversation, and then questions for Natalie, please, in the Q&A. And with that, let me turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to share what's going on at the Library of Congress. It's really hard to fit all of this in our time frame that we have. So I've made some selection based on our focus here and some of the people that may attend. But there's so many more stories to tell about what's happening at the library, especially around innovation. So I wanted to start with some context. So I have slides here so that you can learn more about the library, and it might inform some of the questions and some of your interests. I'll start with about the library. We are the largest library in the world. We were founded in 1800. It's often a race between us and the British Library. The Guinness Book of World Records actually does a test and asks us both to prove it, and we are usually the largest library in the world. So we're proud of saying that. Our mission is to engage, inspire, and inform Congress and the American people. And so we do serve Congress directly, and we do serve the American people. We are also home to the Copyright Office, the Law Library, and the Congressional Research Service. And I, in particular, sit in the Office of the Chief Information Officer, and we have centralized technology, so we help support all across the library. So that's just a little bit about the library. I love this photo when I saw this. It is a popular photo with library staff. It just kind of shows you where we've been and what where we're going, in the sense that we do have a lot of items. We have a lot of data at the Library of Congress, and we do have a very particular foundation and growth. So in 1790, there was a copyright law that was created, and that really was the beginning of our collections. The U.S. Copyright Office was established in 1870. In 1914, Congress established the Legislative Research Service, which is now CRS. The National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled was established by Congress in 1937. And also what's of note here is in 1935, Congress directed and funded the Legislative Research Service, which is now CRS, to prepare bill digests and for them to make them publicly available. So these legislative acts really were influential to the library and the mission that we have and the services that we provide. And I thought there'd be great context there for why we are who we are and what we do. Just the scale, so you understand the scale. We manage, I think the current number is about 186 petabytes of data that we manage. We still receive about 15,000 items a day, physical items. With all that, we have 3,200 permanent staff members to take care of all this. The last I looked, we had about 178 million unique visitors to library online properties. So we are dealing with information at a very, very large scale. A few of our online services, if you're not familiar with the range of what we provide, Congress.gov is our most popular and well-known online service. We also have constitution.congress.gov, which is an amazing resource of the U.S. Constitution and legal analysis and interpretation of the Constitution. The Law Library has law.gov. Our digital collections and our national collections are showcased in LOC.gov. The National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled are at loc.gov/NLS. Our library catalog, copyright.gov, read.gov, and others. So we have quite a range of online services that we provide and administer, manage. Okay, I wanted to, and I love history. I could talk about this for 5 hours. So just this is a selection, especially for this group. We like to always include Henriette Avram, who created the MARC. It was the bibliographic standard for catalog records for libraries across the world in the 1960s, still used today. And we now see that linked data is starting to be used more and more. So it's just amazing that it started with Henriette here in the 1960s, and really that innovation came out of the library, and it's used across the world. Then in the 1960s, around the same time to the 1980s, the House, Senate, and the Library of Congress and in GPO, the Government Printing Office, were asked to iteratively innovate and work on some data and legislative information systems to support the legislative process. So it was really the foundation of the 1960s to the 1980s, where we started to develop systems in order to support Congress and support legislation in the United States. Then the other big markers here in the 1990s, it was a decade of collaboration. And Thomas was released, which is the first website available for the general public, specifically for legislation. And then there was the launch of the Legislative Information System, which was for Congress and really started to provide more access to legislative information. So those are two other really great historical markers. Then Congress.gov, it was decided that those two systems would be combined into one, and that was Congress.gov. It went into beta in 2012 and officially launched in 2016. And again, this is now a replacement for those two systems, Thomas and LAS, and that both Congress and the general public use one system. And so it really streamlined operations, and it made transparent legislation for both groups through this one system. And then another big marker was the launch of the Congress.gov API in 2022, which gives machine-readable access to legislative data information. We get about, total, as I mentioned, about 176 million unique visits a year, and Congress.gov is our most popular online service that is used. Okay, one second. So Congress.gov is really important collaboration within the legislative branch between many parts of the legislative branch. And if you're not familiar with this collaboration, I wanted to just walk through it a bit. So it's directly connected to how we work together and the data that you see within Congress.gov. But it is a collaboration between the House, the Senate, the Government Publishing Office, the Congressional Budget Office, and the Library of Congress. And Library of Congress is the endpoint with Congress.gov, and that in itself is a partnership within the Library of Congress with the Congressional Research Service, the Law Library, the Chief Information Officer, and as well as the Library Services and Collection Group. And so it is really a partnership with the sharing of data, and also the collaboration around data standards. And there are specific groups that actually work together to make sure that there's interoperability and that we're collaborating together so that we can actually deliver what you see on Congress.gov and the data and the API. All right, and some of those groups that have existed for quite a while, and I went through and kind of laid out a history there from the 60s to now. So there are also groups within the legislative branch that have been established and are collaborating to work on this partnership to interchange data, to establish standards, and to modernize data for the sharing and across the legislative branch and through Congress.gov. And so, for example, one pivotal one is the Congressional Data Task Force, which includes all of those groups that I mentioned. And they work on basically understanding how do you disseminate data in a way that actually makes it more interoperable between these groups, and it is modernized so that people do consume it on through the API. And if you're interested in one of the languages that we use the United States Legislative Markup, USLM, and it is now in its current schema is 2.1.0. And if you're interested, It is on GitHub and under the GPO's instance on GitHub, and you're more than welcome to go there and look at the schema that is established and the structure of that. All right. So as I mentioned, there is a Congress.gov API, which we get up to 40 million hits in a month. It is very well used. And it is something to celebrate in the sense that we are one of the few countries, and I believe we were one of the first to actually make legislative data open and transparent and available for others to use and for American citizens to use. So the Congress.gov API is available, and if you look on Congress.gov, you can actually see the structure of the API so that you can actually look at information available through the API. All right, I wanted to kind of end this approach to innovation with this section with kind of an overview of our strategic goals, the Library of Congress, with all of our different services and missions that we provide within the library. We have one strategic plan, which is available online, and we have four main goals. One is to expand access, and then enhance services, strengthen capacity. And for this round of strategic plan, we have a new one, foster innovation. So it is really a value and a goal of the library to foster innovation within the library and to help foster innovation outside of the library. So it is a key strategic goal of ours. All right, artificial intelligence at the library. I love to show this image. It is from the 1920s, and it was labeled, I found this in the collection, it's Mr. Telebox. And I like to call this is the original ChatGPT. It is a interface to a automative device that would turn on and off kettles. And the interface there was the telephone interface. So it was really interesting to see that the audio interface or the chat interface was thought of back in the 1920s. But that is one of the beauty of our American digital collections and the collections of American cultural items is you can see the traces or the lineage of some of these ideas. So we have been using at the library emerging technologies and artificial intelligence for quite a while. One of our longest standing uses of it is in digitization. So OCR and text extraction, for example, is something that we've been doing for quite a while. And as those technologies have improved over time, they have incorporated techniques such as computer vision and text extraction, and we've been using that in digitization for quite a while, so that there are machine accessible, or there are we're converting physical collections into data that then can be served and used in multiple ways. Some of the other benefits of AI that we've seen at the library is helping us scale operations. So collections processing, more than just digitization, but other techniques we used in order to manage, administer our collections and be able to support search and discovery. And the next one, enhance discovery of library staff and our users, so we can use our collections and our information more effectively and understand connections between items. Then another benefit is to be able to support emerging styles of research. So within the library itself, having access to our data through computational analysis allows us to understand what we have, and it allows us to understand the connections between what we have and make some predictions about what can or will be used more or less. But also we support scholars and artists and using our collections through computational processes. And then we've also seen a big benefit of making our business processes more efficient through automation, supportive tools, and predictive metrics. I wanted to insert in here that what we found in our use of AI at the library is that the best application of AI is really in improving the workflow and supporting staff. And the best to make these decisions are the staff in that workflow. And this is a quote I pulled out from the Harvard Business Review. From all of our experimentation in the recent years, it's really the best use right now is supporting staff in the work that we do, and including staff in how to apply AI and how to evaluate the outcomes of AI. We're not using AI to generate a product that we would then use with our external audiences. Right now, we find that the best application is to use it in a way that supports our staff and to involve our staff so that they can build skills as much as anybody who may be managing technology. All right, some experiments and AI use cases at the library currently. As I mentioned, OCR, computer vision, and text extraction for digitization and more. We also are using it for workforce support and automation. We also are using it for geospatial mapping. That's in some of the tools that we use for platforms for geospatial mapping. Performance monitoring. So a lot of our systems, when we monitor the performance of them, they're using tools that actually help with understanding what are the efficiencies or why something may be not performing as expected. Then there's also text-to-speech, text-to-speech, and speech to text. Ironically, that was hard for me to get out the speech part. We're using these technologies in order to have that sort of processing and use it in those particular ways. And then we have a couple of recent experiments. We've been working for the last several years on exploring computational description, which is testing machine learning models to generate bibliographic records, going back to Henriette Avram that I mentioned in the history of innovation at the library. Thinking through the record, the metadata around an item. Right now, it is a very arduous process in order to for a person to do that, especially when you have, as I mentioned, we still have 15,000, 15,000 collection items. That still seems a lot more than 15,000 collection items coming in a day. So can you imagine having a person not only process that item, but then generate a record that has all of the metadata for that item? It would be of great efficiency for us to understand how can AI help us in that process. So we've been experimenting with generating metadata from the actual items themselves. And as with the other two experiments that are listed there, we have found some success with generating some types of metadata, not so much with other types. So this folds into what I brought up earlier around it's really best to use AI in the workflow because you need staff who have really a great expertise in order to really evaluate the outcomes and either augment or change or reject. So that is using AI in order to generate metadata for records has been something of interest to us to improve and see how can we effectively apply that. The other is generative data and text for Congress.gov. As I mentioned the history of Congress.gov, we have a really fantastic group of federal employees that have worked hard over the last couple of decades in order to develop standardized data that you then see and is the engine behind Congress.gov. And so we did an experiment to understand how can we augment the metadata in order to support users of that system, specifically with geographic entities and organizational names. And again, to some success, but not the best success with some types of metadata. So again, that's a part of the experimentation, and that we will refine and refine until we come up with an approach that continuously helps us to be more effective. And then we did a experimentation with bill text to understand what's needed in order to develop an authoritative and authentic bill summary, for example. And again, in some ways, when we can support the analysts to do the job that they do, there is some success, but to date, we have not seen any of our experimentation to date be anywhere comparable to the CRS analysts that do serve that function right now. It is being that we have to be authentic and authoritative. It is will be a continuous iteration in order to be able to deliver that specific type of outcome. And then the third is experimenting with copyright history record books. We have a wonderful public records search for copyright.gov. So if you want to understand who has the copyright for a particular work or particular genre of works, you can use that online search. It only goes so far back because as I mentioned earlier, copyright has been around for quite a while. And so at the very beginning of that office, a lot of it was handwritten and written in historic record books. So we're going back further than each year in order to digitize and include those into the records that you can search. And the farther back you get, the more unique handwriting you'll encounter, and the less structured it is within the book. So that's part of our experimentation, is how do we make the digitization or the actual administration or management of those records to be more effective. That was a lot, but hopefully that gives you an idea of the ways that we are exploring or experimenting or applying AI now in order to support staff who support Congress and the legislative process, and our collections, in order to make the library a more effective place and expand access and enhance our services. All right. So some lessons learned from applying and experimenting with AI. One is, governance is key. We have so many stakeholders, and we want to make sure that we have a strong collaboration, strong partnership, strong communication, and that we are delivering outcomes that are authentic and authoritative. And you've probably heard this many, many times. High quality data and specific domain data will warrant better outcomes. And so since we have so much data and we have some really amazing types of data, that is a really good, good focus for us, in the sense that we want to make sure that we are using high quality data within our workflows, and also if we are training some of these AI models. Responsible AI considerations start from the very beginning. So from our evaluations of products, from our evaluations or experimentation, we want to make sure that we're asking questions about governance and about responsible AI, and about where is the touch point within the workflow for a human in the loop. That is really essential from the beginning. And then traceability and continuous improvement are key for making these outcomes even better. And aligned with that is starting or having quality standards, baseline quality standards, and then looking back to those baseline standards and seeing how your iterations and your refinements or using AI in a different part of the workflow, and possibly in a different way in the workflow, can be an improvement over a previous one. So these are key essential parts to how we've applied AI and our lessons learned. And another part that I'd like to touch on, and some that are really familiar with traditional ICT systems and they're moving into artificial intelligence, I'd just like to reinforce that, data governance and training are really important with AI, because AI systems are very different than traditional IT systems. And traditional IT systems, all parts were designed, developed, and tested. The approach for AI is that you regulate, you fine tune, you look at an outcome and you try to make that outcome better. So because foundational models do not have the traceability of traditional static systems, the governance of those systems is even more important. And I often think about, for traditional IT systems, we think of like the bug. You find the bug, which was literally a bug back in the 50s and 60s, right? You would remove the bug and then the system would work better. Today we have hallucinations, and so hallucinations are approached much differently than bugs. Bugs were with traditional systems. All right. I just wanted to end on two notes. One is a long one is a shorter one. But these 6 points are some conclusions we're making, and it's really helping us set a direction forward for more use of AI across the library, with legislative data, with bibliographic data, with other types of data, and the ways that we are applying these AI systems to the work we do. But the first one is, again, to reiterate that the best application of AI is in the workflow with staff that know that workflow. Our staff and their expertise are a necessity. There is no one size fits all with AI. It would be fantastic to have one tool, one platform, one model, and then apply it all the library. That would make this a lot easier. But as we're finding, there is no one size fits all here with AI. Some models perform better with some types of data, or some models perform better with some functions. And so we're really going through and trying to understand, how do you apply the best AI service or the best AI tool in these many domains. And so, our effectiveness and our mission is really what's needed to sustain this vast cultural heritage. As I mentioned, governance is key, and all of us have a role in ensuring responsible approaches. And at the library, our goal is really to make every outcome trustworthy, authoritative, and authentic. And the fourth is here. The library balances human judgment with machine capabilities. So as I mentioned, governance and responsible AI start from the beginning, and humans in the loop really are required for quality outcomes. We have an approach of exploration before implementation, and continuous effort is key for making these systems perform even better. And these AI technologies are improving rapidly, but as I mentioned, our historical approach to innovation is a part of this longer term mission and goal and horizon that we have. And so we are fully embracing and really considering how to use these to make our mission more effective. All right, and I wanted to add, this is an important one for me, and thinking about resilience in the age of AI. There's a lot of focus on the technology and the data and the science behind this, but we are the Library of Congress, and a lot of the data that we manage is arts and humanities, and the combination of the two is really a way forward to be resilient in the AI age. The understanding of the arts and humanities really helps in giving context to these choices that we're making with the technologies. All right, that's the end. And I always like to end with my favorite quote: "Librarian, the original search engine." Thank you. And please, we're going to take some questions, but there is my contact if you want to ask any questions afterwards.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much. I already see a lot of, we'll leave up that slide just for a minute for people who want to copy that down, and we'll put again your bio in the chat. so that people know how to reach you. And then let's give us Natalie back full screen and give her a chance to see some of the wonderful people who are here. And we have a lot of experts in the room. Maybe we can bring up everyone in just a moment so we can see folks because we have questions coming in. But let me get us started with a little bit of so this is, we have, there's a lot of clarifications that people are asking, but I want to ask you real quick about sort of our strategy and approach versus what's going on in the rest of the world. So, and if you could explain a little bit more sort of the relationship and how things work in terms of prioritization and requests from Congress to the library. My impression, and tell me if I'm incorrect, is that in other countries like Chile and like Brazil, they have a great deal of investment in an internal innovation lab in their legislatures and parliaments. They are therefore able to do a very kind of systematic approach to AI and comprehensive approach to every facet of the lawmaking process. Whereas it's my impression that here we have AI functions divided between House administration, the Library of Congress, other projects that are going on, and we have kind of selected projects that we're doing. I'm wondering if you can just characterize kind of the governance and prioritization and how you would compare our leadership versus the rest of the world.
Oh, wow. I knew you had good questions, Beth. That was a really good one. There's a lot there. And I do want to preface this by saying that, you know, I do not sit in the Congressional Research Service. So my perspective is from the Office of the Chief Associate Technology perspective. And so I'll start.
We'll mute folks.
If I could.
Oh, Natalie, sorry, you might have to unmute yourself.
One thing that I find interesting is because we do, the Library of Congress and those other legislative partners that I mentioned in the House and the Senate, we do engage in discussions with our international, colleagues. So, for example, we'll share best practices with other countries that have similar functions. And not, like you mentioned, there isn't a regular formula of how this is done. It's a combination of who we are as a nation, but also our history and how we've organically grown. So it is true that those functions are distributed a little bit different across the legislative branch than in comparable countries. So it is different, definitely. And the Library of Congress has a mission, a history where we've, provided knowledge, supported Congress with information, have been this repository that, we do provide access to the general public. So it's a bit different than, say, for example, House administration. They're there to support members in a different way. So we all are serving a bit different roles. And so because our missions work together but are different, we tend to focus on providing services that are aligned with our mission. And so our prioritization is we prioritize Congress definitely, but it is also aligned with our mission and our service to Congress. So we do work. It's a lot to answer there. But we do work with our partners, not only in what you see with Congress.gov, but in sharing, building efficiencies. And so if we are using a technology and we've been successful, we'll often meet with, our comparable roles in the House and the Senate, GPO, GAO, and just share this technology is very successful for us. So these are sort of success stories. So I'm trying to there is that, hopefully that answered some of that. The other part that I like to communicate over and over again is that that the transparency that we offer for the legislative process is like no other. I know others do that as well, but it is quite extraordinary when you think about the amount of work that goes into making the data available in Congress.gov. Like, for example, when the bill tracker was released, that is an amazing feature that takes a lot of work behind the scenes in order to see that work effectively. And I know that's a very popular feature and that's used often. So the given the amount of staff and the resources and what the product is and the value that it brings to the American public and Congress, there is a lot of great ideas out there. There's a lot of things that we would like to do, but as you're getting at, Beth, there is a prioritization because we're limited to the structure of how we deliver those services. And so we do have to prioritize. Hopefully I answered a lot of that, but there might have been more there.
So Jim, I'll tell you what, we have so many questions waiting for you, and I'm sure more people will push you. I'm going to ask one more that reflects a question that several people have posed. Jim McGlynn not Jim McGlynn, we're going to call on him in just a moment. Jim Meager in the chat, Anjit, one of our AI for Impact students, and I are all asking the question about are you exclusively testing commercial models against congressional data? Is there any thought about building a public or open model? And I might add, and maybe somebody will put a link in the chat, that the Library of Congress just plays host to an event on public AI where these topics were discussed and debated. I'm wondering where the thinking is in terms of a publicly governed model, open model versus commercial models at the present moment.
Right. And to kind of point back to one of my concluding statements there, what we found is there isn't one end-all be-all model. So part of our experimentation is quite wide in that we're constantly looking at how are these different models performing. And so we do a mix of understanding what are the commercial foundational models, the commercial models that are available through a lot of the products that we use in the federal government, but we also will go to a resource like Hugging Face, for example, and use models there and test the specific models against our domain data to understand how they perform. So we do both because we have to understand the landscape of the choices in order to make the best choice. So that is something that I think is an approach at the library that I think is a wonderful one because it helps us understand what's happening commercially, what's happening, in the open source community, what other things are being released to try to keep up with all of those options to be able to make the best choice there. Ideally, I mean, I personally am invested in making all of this as open and transparent for the American people here. We've had discussions about an AI platform. And so in order to support staff, in order to deliver the services better, but a lot of the work that we do is to support scholars, support researchers. As you know, Congress is who we serve, but we also support a lot of researchers, a lot of scholars, a lot of artists, a lot of different types of American groups in the United States. And so ideally, that's part of the journey, or that's part of the plan, is that if we're supporting them by giving them access to our collections online, if we're supporting them by giving them data online, there is probably somewhere in the future where we're supporting them by giving them access to a platform, but that's not in the in the near future, because that in itself is another it requires resources and staff to be able to do something like that.
And Ted has a question also in the chat, and I will just flag at the same time, Lorelei Kelly is here, who did a wonderful paper, and I think others have also written, myself included, about the ways we can use this data to train other AI models. Are you getting a lot of companies coming to you requesting data from you, or they're probably scraping the data without having to do much asking because it's all already open. But are you having any conversations with the companies who want this data for their purposes?
A couple there. So my chief information officer, the person that is my boss, Judith Conklin, has a wonderful article in Forbes that I think was published maybe 2 months ago, and specifically addressing that. It might be behind a paywall though, in order to get the full text. But I think they have some of it
we will
online.
take care of that and share that. we shared the paywall link, but I will take care of now putting the article in the chat.
Right.
But in the meantime, let's bring in some of our. Oh, sorry. Did I didn't want to cut you off.
I just want to add that as I mentioned, we get up to we get a lot of pings on our API. Again, our library staff are again very invested in modern technologies, using the best approaches, and so the release of our APIs, the structure of our APIs, have allowed some of these companies to go directly and use our APIs. We still get a lot, so we track who's coming, who's scraping, as much as we can, right? And the use of our APIs, and more we're getting bots from these sorts of companies that are gathering our data in the ways that we allow them to. We limit it, but they are doing it. We do have a lot of people approaching us to work with them, but it needs to be responsible, and that's part of our decision.
Sorry, I am trying to post Lorelei's paper at the same time, but I'll do that in just a moment, or ask her if she can do that. And in the meantime, let me bring in some of our wonderful folks who are here and see if Ann Washington wants to unmute. She's a bit of a ringer, having worked at the Congressional Research Service in the past, now at NYU, but she has a question. I'll ask her to ask it.
Great, thank you. Yes, Associate Professor of Data Policy. And I actually helped dig out that electronic version of that 1973 report of how all the gizmos worked. So I'm excited that it still has a long electronic life. So I'm about to release a paper on large language models in the public interest. And I am thinking about what is it that we can do. When I for the government, right, I was always looking, we're under-resourced. What can we do for you? I know that the nature is everything is open data. We did a lot of work to make that possible. What are some of the questions that we could do some research that would help what you're working on?
I'm going to take you up on that and contact you after. There's so much there. You got me there. The first place that my mind goes to is the expanding access is definitely a goal of ours. Enhancing your service is definitely a goal, but one of our not necessarily explicitly stated missions are to preserve, and this is I think a concern that many have, in that we have a whole program and a whole approach for preservation here, obviously, but I guess the thought that would be wonderful to have more research into is preservation of of data and the ephemeral nature of information on the internet. We have a fantastic web archives team, and again, you can go to loc.gov and see the fantastic work that they do. But the volume of information, the volume of data, is a constant evaluation, and the ephemeral nature of this. It would be good, I think, for more national discussion around preservation of data and our digital culture, that could have a lot more voices and be a lot more, a wider discussion, definitely. That's the first thing that comes to mind.
Please feel free to also use the chat to, I think we have a lot of people who would like answers to this question and also to suggest what it is you would like to volunteer and to do. And with that, let me pass the mic now to Daniel Schumann. If you can unmute. Daniel is a font of knowledge, so be prepared for the question. Fair warning.
Well, that sounds like an ominous way to start. Thank you so much for speaking with all of us. It's such a pleasure to hear what you're working on. To restate the obvious, like the Library of Congress is Congress's library, and it has a unique role because it's laser focused on Congress. I think this is one of the points that you were getting across. I was hoping that you could describe the library's initiatives to use AI to improve public access to legislative and policy-making data. I know you touched upon it a little bit, but I'd love to hear more. And also, how best can the public collaborate with you on helping to co-create these tools and services? Thanks so much.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, I'm going to start with the two answers. There are one is the Congress.gov API. That was a big step forward for us. It's always helpful for us to know what people are using and how they want to engage with data on Congress.gov. So any sort of feedback around what is successful, if it's not successful, what kind of technologies you may be working on next, and how that how that fits is always useful to know. As someone mentioned, there is a Congress.gov public forum, which is an opportunity to provide that. And at times prior to the forum, there is I believe, a survey. I'm trying to remember the last one that was there. Remember exactly, but where you can give feedback. Definitely. So that's one way to engage. When it comes to co-creating, that's a bigger question. I have to think through that, but that feedback is definitely one way to do that. There's also, I believe, I mentioned GitHub. I believe there's a forum there, or at least there's a method in order to provide feedback via the GitHub spaces on the products there.
So the GitHub repository is for feedback on the API, but it's not for feedback generally on like data tools and services. I mean, the library does host the annual forum for public feedback, and there are the quarterly meetings of the Congressional Data Task Force, but that's looking at the legislative branch writ large. If there are ways, just because what you're doing is so cool, if there are ways to best engage with you in the work that you're doing, I think a lot of us would be really interested in helping to co-create or to collaborate. There's great spaces on GitHub that civil society has set up. We'd love to have the library more active there as well. So like, just let us know how we can, best work together. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take you up on that. Thank you. Thanks for the offer.
Great. I'm going to bring in now two students, and since they're in the same room, let's take two questions, and then we'll have you answer them. So first, let me go over to Jai, and then we also have a question from Kaushik, who's also, I think, in the same room. So let's see if we can unmute you guys.
Hey, Natalie here, but I'm Jasuri. I'm a student researcher at Burn Center for Social Change. So you did mention earlier that you had like around 180 petabytes of data. So my question is, how are you like storing and retrieving it? And my follow-up question to that is, how if there is AI which uses that, and there is some kind of copyrighted information or restricted information, and AI uses that for some other thing. So how are you like creating a balance on like how are you regulating that? That's my question.
Right, those are two big, really important questions. The first one, if you really want the details on how we approach storage, there's, I think it's ilsc.gov, it might be digital preservation, or it's digitalpreservation.gov. I haven't memorized that. You could search for Designing Storage Architectures Conference. So the Library of Congress hosts a conference every year in order to talk about the latest and greatest approaches for huge storage, approaches to manage that much data. So we have it is a lot of data, and that is not all a single copy, right? So we both have to preserve, as I mentioned, and we present. So we want to give people access to the items that we have made available online. And so our preservation is, treated a bit differently than our presentation data. So we follow best practices of a 3-2-1 approach for that. So that's what makes it get quite large, but it also reflects the amount of items that we receive, especially with born digital content. It's just exploded, as you all can imagine. So if you take a look, if you're really interested in the approach there, it is a combination, because when it comes to digital preservation, you want to make sure like you have it in multiple locations, you have multiple types of media and that sort of thing. So it's not all in one type of storage, it's actually distributed. So that is that. And the second one is, yes, and I don't work in the U.S. Copyright Office, so I can't speak for any of that, but I do know.
I just wanted to know how are you utilizing responsible AI to your data?
Right. It is and as I mentioned, that starts in the beginning, and that is a question at the beginning. And so our experimentation is with data that is, the rights have been evaluated. And we do not use those sorts of collections for the type of experimentation that we've done. And as I've mentioned, it's we have an approach where we're looking at commercial products, commercial AI services. We're training our own models. So, it's again, trying to pick the best tool for the best use in the workflow. And we're very, very sensitive to rights. Rights is and there might be some people here that are trained in rights. It is a whole, that is a whole career. So it is something that we're sensitive to. And I'm lucky that I have some of the best experts in the world here in the Library of Congress. And so if there's ever any question, it's that, it's done. I know who to go to. So.
Thank you very much. I think because we're right at the top of the hour, maybe what I'm going to do is very quickly ask two questions that were outstanding. Oops, I think I'm muted. Let me say that again. In the interest of time, I'm going to just very quickly try to ask you two or three things that are waiting in the chat and in the Q&A. So I noticed that Jim McGlynn is here from the Massachusetts House of Representatives, and I'm looking for his question again. Sorry, there's a lot of things I'm scrolling, but maybe I will find it in the chat in just a moment. I had it here a second ago. But in the meantime, what I will do is, go over, and I lost it. So I'm going to ask you one other quick thing that was posed in the chat, which is really just about how you are getting ready to adapt over time. So maybe just to end this is really to get a sense of, with everything being so fast changing, what is the approach to both acting now and acting for the ages, as the library tends to think about itself with a very long time horizon and as a repository for knowledge forever? And yet this is happening right now, and we want to take care of it, take advantage of it right now. How do we balance those two priorities?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it is a balance. So, as I mentioned, resilient. You think about resilience, and it is bringing that humanities perspective, the human perspective, to this, and really fostering exploration, and trying to understand what it is and how to best use it, and explore before implementation. And it's a lot of research. So we're constantly every day trying to keep an eye on what's there. And it is very overwhelming. It's a lot, but it's kind of ironic in a way. It's changing so fast that if you didn't catch it one day, most likely it's changed the next day, and then you can catch it again. So it is constant, but it's so important to keep humans, in the loop, keep thinking about the long-term implications of these technologies, and to keep an open mind and explore as much as you can.
Well, with that, we've only just scratched the surface, and I think you have a large group here that would like to continue to stay in touch with your work. I will leave the chat open for more people who want to add. I think there's a lot of very specific and technical and other questions that are going. But we will, in just a moment, end our live stream for those who are joining us online. And I want to just say thank you extraordinarily to Natalie, not just for giving of your time today and sharing the work going on at Library of Congress, but for the service and for your public service and the work that you're doing day to day at the library and with Congress to try to make lawmaking more transparent and more effective. Please join us for our next event. In the lecture series, we will be having a talk from DeepMind folks talking about the new Habermas machine. DeepMind's Michael Henry Tesler and Mikhail Bakker from DeepMind will be joining us on February 27th at 4 p.m. That will be both in person in Boston and online. And we'll put the link to sign up in the chat for that. And then on March 20th at 5 p.m., we'll be welcoming Ed Bies of Medan, coming to share with us how Medan is using AI in 55 countries around the world to combat disinformation and misinformation and help run better elections. So lots of hopeful and helpful